You know, for almost 60 years, Star Trek has been all about boldly going where no one has gone before, and it's always united fans around this really hopeful vision of the future. But the announcement of a new show, Starfleet Academy, well, it's done pretty much the exact opposite. It has sparked this huge, fiery debate that's basically split the fandom right down the middle. So in this explainer, we're going to break down the core arguments in what's become a full-blown online culture war.
And really, it all boils down to this one single explosive question. When you love something, does that give you the right to criticize it? Or does being a true fan mean you have to accept how it evolves no matter what? This question, right here, is the fuel for this entire conflict. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at how the fandom got so divided. Then we'll get into the accusation made by the publication The Mary Sue, and follow that up with a rebuttal from YouTuber The Critical Drinker. After that, we'll dig into the two totally different visions of Star Trek that are at the very heart of this thing, before we hear the final word from both sides. All right, first up, a fandom divided. Look, the announcement of Starfleet Academy was supposed to be this big celebration, right? A new chapter in a universe everyone loves. Instead, it instantly became a battleground. On social media, you basically had two camps form overnight. For some, this was a fresh, exciting new direction. But for others, it felt like a total betrayal of everything Star Trek was supposed to stand for. So as this whole thing just exploded online, two key voices really emerged, and they perfectly captured these opposing viewpoints. And you got to understand, they aren't just arguing about a TV show. Nope. They're arguing about legacy, about identity, and ultimately who gets to claim ownership of this cultural icon. So in one corner, we have an article from the pop culture site The Mary Sue, which is defending the new show and the direction it's taking. And in the other corner, we have a viral video rebuttal from the popular, and let's be honest, often controversial, YouTube creator, The Critical Drinker. Their clash really is the perfect snapshot of this fandom civil war. Okay, let's dig into the first side of this. We'll start with the first shot that was fired in this whole exchange, the Mary Sue's argument. And what's wild is that it doesn't just disagree with the critics, it basically questions their right to even have an opinion in the first place. Now, the framing here is what's so fascinating. The article doesn't just say the critics are wrong. It specifically labels them as part of a political group, right-wing figureheads, and argues that their ideology makes it impossible for them to ever get the progressive heart of Star Trek. So it's not a disagreement about quality, it's an ideological accusation. And here it is, laid out, plain and simple. It's not a suggestion, it's a flat-out declaration. The article just asserts that those dude bros mad at Starfleet Academy aren't actual Star Trek fans. The point they're making is that this anger isn't coming from a place of love for the franchise, but from the fact that they were never real fans to begin with. It's a direct shot at their identity. And this quote, this is really the core of their whole argument. It's the most powerful and maybe most controversial claim they make, that it was never for them. It suggests that Star Trek has always had a specific intended audience, and these critics, well, they were never on the guest list. This idea of exclusivity is what really set the whole thing on fire. Okay, so how do you respond when you're told that the thing you've loved for decades was actually never meant for you? Well, the Critical Drinker fired back with a detailed rebuttal, and he wasn't just defending his opinion, he was defending his identity as a fan. So his first move was to basically lay out his fan cred, right? He makes it really clear he isn't just some troll jumping on a hate bandwagon. He talks about growing up with the show, his love for the classic series, and he makes a point to say he even championed Voyager and its female captain. This is his way of saying, hey, my criticism isn't rooted in some anti-progressive bias. Then he pivots. He goes from a personal defense to something a bit more philosophical. He frames the internet not as a war zone, but as a marketplace of ideas. The concept here is pretty simple. All opinions, good and bad, get to compete out in the open. And the best ones, the ones that connect with the most people, they're the ones that'll naturally rise to the top. He's saying, I'm not an authority, I'm just one voice in that marketplace. And this is his big challenge. He basically flips the whole accusation right back at them. He's saying, if my so-called wrong opinion is so popular, maybe it's not because my audience is toxic. Maybe it's because my argument actually has some merit. He's directly asking them to think about why his critique is connecting with so many damn people. Now we're getting to the absolute heart of it all.
Because this whole debate, it isn't really about casting or plot points or special effects. It is a fundamental, deep disagreement over the very purpose and soul of Star Trek itself.
So this slide just lays it all out, side by side. On the one hand, the critical drinker argues that classic Trek was aspirational and mature. It was driven by intellectual curiosity, and it gave you big ideas to think about. But on the other hand, he paints Starfleet Academy as a shallow teen soap opera, one that delivers propaganda you're just supposed to accept, made for what he calls the TikTok generation. I mean, the difference between these two visions just could not be more extreme.
This quote just drives that point home with incredible force. He frames the original shows as this reflection of our highest potential, the best of humanity. But he sees the new show as the worst of what it is right now. Shallow, vapid, disposable. For him, the franchise has gone from something to aspire to something cynical.
All right, let's get to our final section and see how this all wraps up with two completely opposite conclusions. Because after all the arguments and all the rebuttals, both sides are left with totally irreconcilable feelings about what Starfleet Academy even is.
First, let's hear the final word from the Mary Sue. For them, the show is this comforting continuation of everything they love. It's a warm hug, it's fun, and it's perfectly in line with what they see as Gene Roddenberry's original dream. It's a vision of positivity and inclusion, a Star Trek for a new generation.
And then you have the blunt, completely unfiltered conclusion from the critical drinker. He just strips away all the philosophical layers and offers the simplest, most direct explanation for the backlash. That maybe, just maybe, the show is, well, a bit shit. The contrast between those two final thoughts is just absolute. And that leaves us here. And this isn't just about Star Trek. It's about Star Wars, it's about Doctor Who, it's about any story that dares to last for generations. As these cultural giants change and adapt for new audiences and new times, who gets the final say on their legacy? Is it the creators, the critics, or is it the fans who have been there from the very beginning? That's really the question at the center of it all.